we designed the blue boards, which were a 24 channel, that whole, and we went out and did zillions of shows for all the biggest acts there were with that equipment for years on end. The other big competition was Claire and Showco. So we were the West Coast connection, and we were in Hermosa Beach, and all the guys who came in from England who were looking pasty white, they all like to go down to the beach and get a suntan. So we were right in the right place for those guys. And so that went on for a number of years until I was doing the Fleetwood Mac gigs, and the actual, I guess he was the band manager, pulled me aside, took me into his hotel room, made me do things that I can't talk about, and he said, "You got to stop with Tycho Brahe, and you got to start doing your own thing right now because you're too valuable to be wasted." And he said, "You go start your own sound company. I mean, your own company." So in 1976, I told Bob Bogdanovich, "That's it. I'm starting my own thing." And I just started designing the SC32 and the HC40, which is a house and a monitor console. And those consoles are what Charles was talking about, and what that we were saying from 1980, and that was all part of us designing the first ones. And we tried everything we could think of to make them the best they could possibly be, because nothing was like that then. Nobody cared about the parts or anything at that time. So we were really trying hard. And from there, it just turned into, I had to get out of LA because I had 100 people chasing me around everywhere, trying to get me to do projects for them, and I had to get out of there. So this was a wonderful chance to move to the mountains and have a wonderful shop and have a beautiful life that didn't involve getting killed on the freeway every week, which is what was going on. I mean, I'd missed, you guys drive down there all the time. It's dangerous on the freeways down there. It used to be more dangerous when you could go fast. But, that's how that all started, and we moved up here and started designing. We put together a whole bunch of those HCs and SCs, and then we designed the new EX56, which was the next thing, and we sold a bunch of those. And then Crest Audio and Don Pearson with ultrasound and Meyer Sound all got together, and they kind of talked John Lee at Crest Audio into going ahead and taking on the EX56 as a product that they could make. And so we did that for a whole bunch of years. They sold 100 of those, by the way, at $75,000 a piece, except for Claire, who we charged $85,000 to because they could afford it. And, all that took place until Peavey bought Crest Audio in, I think it was 94. No, it was 96, sorry. At any rate, and so then I was on my own because John Lee said, "Well, we wanted to do this DCX thing with you. You're into it. You designed it. And I want to tell you something. Some of the most incredible people on the planet have been involved with the DCX and its design. From electronics designs to picking the parts, to picking the ICs, to picking everything. Everything that we did involved a lot of people. It wasn't just me. It was a lot of the really famous people that I could name, but they probably wouldn't appreciate it. A list a mile long of people who contributed to make this happen. It was a wonderful adventure. We've had a wonderful time doing it. We spent a hell of a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars to do this. We've made 10 DCX consoles so far, and unfortunately we're not going to be able to make any more because we don't have any money. So, look at this module. Check it out, man. This is the stuff. This is the stuff.
That is beautiful.
This is what we're putting into the DCXs. These are, the the best op amps you can buy on the planet that make this whole thing possible. It's all done in 4-layer. You know, it took us a year just to lay out these circuit boards. I mean, it was Blake helped do the layout. Blake and I both went blind trying to lay out this stuff on a really crummy monitor with a really crummy computer at the beginning in 1994 when we started laying the stuff out. By 1996, we'd found the right software guys, fabulous people. I went over to Las Vegas and saw this guy, Bob Lentini. Actually, I ran into Bob Lentini at AES in 92, and he showed me this thing on a monitor that actually controlled things, and I went, that's what we need to do. The hell with knobs, we need to be doing this, you know? So I went to Bob Lentini and asked him to do it, and he said he would, and then he kind of hemmed and hawed and said, nah. But, so I stole his two chief software people, and they started a new software company that I was funding called Cortec, and they wrote all the software for this. The most incredible software people on the planet. I mean, the stuff that this guy Risto did was beyond. I mean, at that time, Windows only allowed 256 controls on a actual screen. That was the limit back when we were doing it. And we just ported right through Windows and wrote all of our own software in C. All those controls that are on here, these are all written in C. Every single line you see and has a piece of code to make it all happen. That's so that we could, you know, blast through, you know, zillions and zillions upon zillions of controls if you want. You know, here, look at how many controls are here. Wow. There's just a zillion controls. Look at this. How many is that on that screen? Well, it'll do more than that, but I'm saying you can't even do this today. I mean, because in today's software, you go up and you click a spot, and it's not really the control, it's just a spot. And then it opens up to, you know what I mean. These are the actual controls. These are the actual, I mean, you're right there controlling them. We had a wonderful time making this thing. And we made everybody's minds concentrate on making this as best it could possibly be. I mean, the capacitors that are in here are WEMA, audiophile, non-polarized, you know, the best thing you can buy for audio in the world. We decided we're going to do it the absolute best way there is. I mean, from having the plus and minus voltages be really high so you had lots of headroom, to getting the noise down so it's really, really low, to making the card cages fabulous with giant, huge copper bars for grounding on the back. And I mean, it was an undertaking all the way, and I loved every minute of it.
What was it like working with Blake?
I loved Blake. Blake was the most supportive person in the world. Blake was doing shows around here at there was a local place where they started doing shows, and he was in a band, and, you know, I would come to the shows, and we would hang out, and he found out, you know, the first time he came up here to the shop, he said, somebody told me that, you know, we'd be meeting someday, and here, you know, here you are, and, you know, so, of course, Blake had to be part of the team. And he worked tirelessly. I mean, as much time as he could find to put in here, and I just, you know, ran him ragged. We both ran ourselves ragged, but I'm saying working on the stuff. Working all the time, always trying to make it better, always trying to get input from everyone, always trying to get the little software bugs worked out. We worked on the software for 10 years to make it so it's perfect, and it's now absolutely perfect. It never, ever has a problem. So, I mean, and that's a hard thing to do. They're having trouble with OS 9 right now.
Seems like you've been innovative since day one, going all the way back to your addition of a 2440, moving the industry forward from 2482's phenolic drivers you mentioned and going to 075 bullet super tweeters. For a long time, that double 15 2-inch was somewhat of a standard. It carried on into Schubert Systems, which is what Tycho Brahe became, and
Right.
still many other companies adopted that. So you pushed the envelope back then. Not only that, but also with the blue console you mentioned. Wasn't it uncommon in '69 for somebody to have a 24-channel console?
Yeah, the 16 was about as big as they were
And
then.
that was big.
Yeah, 24 was a lot.
Uh-huh.
But it had dual band limiters built into it so that we put the frequency at 250 hertz, which is right in the middle. So we had a separate compressor for the 250 below, separate one for 250 above, and that way people could pump the bass and it wouldn't bother the vocals. You know what I mean? In a live situation, it was a wonderful thing, and we made it so that nobody could disconnect it anyway. So all the shows that Tycho Brahe did all had this dual band limiter thing going on in the blue boards, which really helped a lot.
I heard a rumor that these are still out there functioning. Is this...
We made about 32 of those blue boards, and from what I can tell, they're still out there. I get emails every day from people that have them, and I get emails every day from people that have the EX56s, which all 100 of them, as far as I know, are still working. And one of my buddies, Kevin Krecky at Pro Audio Rentals in Palo Alto, I sent him all the parts for the EX56s. He's now the repair station. And, he started off, trying to charge people, and they were grumbling. He finally said, okay, that's it. Send me $5,000, put a $5,000 check in with your console and ship it to me, and it'll come back to you brand new. So that's what he does these days. For $5,000, we'll make it perfect. I got my kid cleaning the faders. I got all the parts here. I can get it all going. So as far as I know, all the EX56s are working.
You mentioned the innovative features in the blue console and in the SC and the HC. Can you address something about the EX?
The EX had, just like the DCX has, it has a 24 dB per octave low cut or high pass. And we found out in live sound that 18 dB is not enough. You need to have 24. Not only that, it comes out in phase again when you do that. And so that's one of the things that's in the EX56, which is really great. I don't know. We used high voltage op amps in the 56. It runs on plus or minus 20 volts, so that's really a lot. And so there's a lot of headroom in those things. They're just they're the most beautiful thing. I can remember going to so many shows. I remember the Ricky Lee Jones show we did up at the college. That I went to that show, and she sang so softly, and you could get it just perfect. And then she went so loud, and it was just perfect. And I love the EX56. Lots of knobs. People love them. They got knobs. But we need to move away from that because we need a way to recall the mix file instantly, any mix file instantly, and be able to control it. So this is the result of that. And yeah, we got a few knobs, but it's much easier to use with a mouse than anything. And people hate that because mice are old-fashioned. You know what I mean. But as soon as you put somebody on one, 5 minutes later, they're just all over it. They got it down. And eventually, during the show, they'll get the Gamble grin. Everybody gets the Gamble grin. When you go to the show tonight, you're going to get the Gamble grin. I promise you. I promise you. That was a Blakeism, by the way, that Gamble grin thing.
So you think the learning curve is much shorter for your console than the other consoles?
I think I made it absolutely fun and easy to use because I know how hard it is and how much stress people are on when they're trying to do the show, They need all the help they can get. They don't need anything that happens that they don't understand. And, for the most part, it's just as straightforward as it can be.
You mentioned being able to address the mix files. What else is innovative in this?
In the DCX?
Yes.
The DCX is to die for. It's the kind. It's absolutely the best thing in the world. It's flat from 1 hertz to 200,000 throughout the whole console, anywhere in the console. It doesn't have any discernible distortion. When we put it on the Audio Precision, we don't, when you take a scope and you look at what's the distortion property look like, it's all sine waves. It's just bleed from circuit to circuit, bleed. There isn't any distortion, so it has no distortion. It's got frequency response to die for. It's got special circuits inside of it that have back-to-back Zener diodes that prevent any particular circuit in the entire thing from ever clipping. Nothing can ever clip in the thing. It's, if you run it up and, clip lights come on, but it's not really clipping, it's just squishing. It's like tube squishing. It sounds like tube squishing. That's what it sounds like. There's 16 stereo auxes in this thing. There's 8 stereo subgroups in this thing. In fact, this is a full-on stereo everything from one end to the other, something that most things aren't. In fact, just about nothing is. So we're really concentrating on trying to get people to do stereo. When you listen to one of the digital consoles, it sounds like a ball of sound in the center, and it's because there's no stereo imaging left. When you use a DCX, all of a sudden you can hear the exact position of each one of the instruments, provided you pan it correctly, of course. But I'm saying it's far and above any of the digital consoles, and we've had a lot of them into the Crystal Bay, and we've done A/B test in there, and the sound guys would say, "Oh my God, I didn't realize I was putting up with this all this time."
You mentioned how influential Don Pearson was in some of the designs and what went into the consoles.
Donnie.
Can you discuss him for a little bit?
I love
Explain
Donnie.
who he was, where he came from, and why he was significant?
He was the most wonderful person to me. He's the one who made it possible for me to, bring my stuff there. And see, what happened is that he came up here to Tahoe, and I brought him in the shop, and we were building this HC40 at the time, and I made him start working on it. I went, "You walked in the door, we need help, we're trying to get this done. Come on, sit down here and start doing this. We'll show you how to do it." I started making him work right as soon as he walked through the door. And he loved it. He just loved the whole idea of doing it right here in such an obscure place, and you know what I mean? He went down there and said, "Man, we got to start using this guy's stuff. We checked it out on this test gear. It's the kind, we got to do it, It's an upgrade." That's how he presented it to them.
And where did he come from, and why is he so significant?
It was him and Howard Danchek, who you're going to meet tonight, because he's mixing front of house. Howard is. So Howard and Don Pearson were the two people that put all the money into ultrasound to make it happen. Those were the people. You're going to meet Howard tonight. I understand he's coming up.
And why is ultrasound significant?
Because they cared. They really cared. Beyond.
Fanatical attention to detail like you?
Yes, exactly right. Just love those guys. They were trying so hard to make everything sound right all the time. So it was a wonderful thing. I loved dealing with Don Pearson. He's such a wonderful person. He influenced a lot of people's lives throughout the whole industry, but he spent very much time with me. We had a really wonderful time together. He helped me with all the schematics. He got me the right people to help me. It's very important you get the right people. I'm just one guy who's trying to, get everybody coordinated to do this thing. It's all these really incredible, talented people worked on the DCX. It was just a scene. We had a great time doing this, and some of the most incredible. All the people from Crest Audio were involved in the DCX. All those engineers. And
some people credit Don Pearson with being one of the first people to actually time align a rig. Is that your understanding?
Yes, he was the original guy who started out, using the SIM system.
Mm-hmm. And why is this significant?
I always thought he was full of shit, but he'd do that stuff and he'd tune, and he'd be, I never bought into it. I thought that you could do it more easily by ear than, You know, because I was from all the shows I'd done all these years. I'm going, how come all of a sudden we need to have this thing when we got along just fine without it all these years? But he was into it, and it was his main job, really, was to keep tuning the system, you know, all the time. He was always looking at the RTA thing at all times.
I think I was referring to physically aligning the boxes.
Oh,
though.
yeah, that's another one.
Did you feel that that made a huge difference?
Well, you know, back in the old days, there wasn't any line arrays. We just set up the cabinets around the stage to kind of, you know. But we did notice that when we accidentally would pile them all together, that it really worked well. When we stacked them on top of another, put a big strap over them so they didn't kill somebody. When we had limited area to set the speakers up, we'd turn them on their sides and just put a big pile of them. And you know what? That was amazing that worked before even anyone knew about line arrays. And then that whole line array thing came during the Grateful Dead thing. I mean, originally they were just setting up speaker cabinets, you know, trying to cover it like that.
Mm-hmm. Are there any features in any of the consoles that you can remember that you could specifically attribute to Don Pearson that you thought he brought to the table?
No. He wasn't a circuitry. Well, he knew all about circuitry, but he wasn't a guy who added, you know, to that. It was other much more qualified experts that, you know, had their whole lifetime of being geniuses with electronic designs.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about your high-pass filter earlier and the necessity for a steeper slope. This must have come from your engineering experience.
And from doing shows. And you know, one of the things that's nice about this particular circuit, which is right here, is that it uses Bessel filters. And a Bessel filter, there's no overshoot. Overshoot is when a first transients happen in real life, you know, not just a tone from a sine wave, but, you know, actual music, transients. A transient can make a low cut bounce over its spot, and it causes a really nasty, horrible crunch sound, you know? It's horrible. A Bessel filter has no overshoot, so you never have that going on. So that's one of the real wonderful parts of this particular low-cut filter. I mean, the list goes on and on about all the things that make these special, like the whole preamp and how that's all done, preamp, mic preamps, how all the EQ is done. It's all done. How we could use an effect compressor to do the comp. How we went to a lot of trouble to get the actual gate to be absolutely silent when it turns off and on. Here's the EQ section. You know, it's 4 bands of EQ, all done with full parametric, all done with, you know, the nice thing about this EQ is the 2 center bands. Yeah, you can do plus 15 dB when you boost it, but it does minus 40 cut in a notch. So, because anytime you want to cut something, you want to only cut as little as possible. So you want to have a notch, and sometimes you want to cut it quite a bit, more than 15 dB. If you're trying to get rid of a nasty thing that's happening, you can take a note completely out. And this is like the bandwidth on these is like from 1/10 of an octave to 2 octaves. So you can set it for 1/10 of an octave and take one note completely out. Stuff like that. This has, you know, shelving and peak on both the low cut and the high cut. High cut, high frequency.
Did any manufacturers that came before give you inspiration for any of your circuits?
You know, I have schematics from a whole bunch of circuit board designs. And so from looking at those and seeing what they did wrong, that helped a lot. You know, I never really stole anything from them. I just would look at how they were doing it and laugh when I'd see something they did that was silly.
Mm-hmm. Earlier when we were looking at all the tour passes, I couldn't help but wonder, all of this experience brought you to this one point. Do you think you finally achieved audio nirvana, or are you still looking?
Nope, I'm done. I got there. Loved the way it turned out. Yes, we spent way too much money. Yes, it's the kind that nobody would ever do. You know, nobody would ever go to that much trouble or spend that much money on anything. So, but we're having a wonderful time using them. And they're going to be around forever. That's how they're made. They're going to be around for decades of doing shows. They've been around for a while. But I mean, after I'm gone, they'll still be doing shows.
Mm-hmm. Earlier, you briefly touched on the difference to your ear between what you hear in digital versus analog. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit more?
Digital sucks. It's that simple. No, it's not true. Here's the deal. At line level, if you're not trying to do anything except for just take a line level signal and turn it into digital, it sounds fine. I mean, you listen to CDs every day. They sound fine. You listen to DVDs. They sound fine. You know, you put a line level signal in and you can turn that into digital, no problem, and it'll sound just fine. The thing is, mixing sound is another story. Trying to get microphone preamps that are correct. Trying to get the EQ. There's no digital consoles that have the correct EQ to do live sound, is my opinion. They're really a bunch of crap. And they do sound crappy, too. They have lousy things that you need to make mixing live sound good. Actually, mixing any sound. You know, a lot of the, believe it or not, in my talking to people, a lot of the really great orchestra stuff that's done in digital, it's all mixed on analog consoles first. That's the way it is. They use analog consoles to mix a symphony orchestra together. They don't use digital consoles. It doesn't come out any good. So all the main studios are using analog whenever they got to mix a lot of channels together.
So you're saying there's a difference in the way digital sums versus analog.
Absolutely. And you know, the problem with digital is it cannot possibly sum that stuff together correctly. You know the digital fuzz that you hear in digital recordings?
Can you be more explicit?
Fuzz, distortion. It's digital distortion. It's very small, but you can hear it on everything. All the mics have it, anything that's that way. The stereo separation is the real problem. There's no way for them to, combine all that together digitally and have it come out correct. It doesn't ever come out correctly.
So this fuzz that you're hearing is distortion. Does it manifest itself as a thinner, less punchy sound to your ear?
No, it's not that. It's the actual, you can actually hear it riding right on the top of the vocal mics. You can hear the fuzz, it sounds distorted. It sounds like they turned up the thing into clipping is what it sounds like, a little bit, you know what I mean? But it's not that, it's just that it's digital.
Mm-hmm. And is the problem with the equalization, the latency? What's causing this?
I think it's that they turned it into digital. They're trying to take a mic, put some gain on it, EQ it. The combination of all that stuff, it ends up, the vocals got this fuzz on them all the time.
Mm-hmm. I once heard a story about you mixing someplace on the 4th of July and somebody throwing a firecracker near the mixing console while you were mixing. Can you elaborate on that story for a second?
No. Nice try, Henry.
Fair enough.
You mean the fact that I couldn't hear after that?
No, the fact that everybody in the stadium started throwing them and you crawled underneath the mix platform to mix.
I remember that. That's right, because
Why
we
don't
were
you
down
tell
on
the story, 'cause
we were
it's
down
funny.
on the ground at a stadium. Actually, it was a little riser, but here's all these stands, and it's for one guy, two guys, everybody. They started bombarding us with firecrackers. And they were they would go off all over here in the sound booth. I'm trying to do the show. It got so bad I just crawled underneath the table and
How did you do that from underneath?
I didn't do anything. I hid. I was didn't mix anything. I was just hiding from
I
firecrackers
get hurt.
and M80s. I'm sure. You know what I mean.
Was touring a different world back then than what it's like now? Seems that it's a little more corporate these days.
It was a lot of fun back then. There was a lot of carrying on. I remember we did Rod Stewart at the Hollywood Bowl, and the Hollywood Bowl had a thing going on where they had these compressors that you had to, if you were using your own console, you had to go through their compressor that they had set so that, you know, to limit the level of how loud the sound would go through their PA system. And anybody who came in there had to go through there. Well, I accidentally bypassed. I fed it to them thinking that they were controlling it, and we kept it down through pretty much the whole show. But then when Rod Stewart gave us the sign, we cranked it up so loud, and everybody was having a cow in the management of the Hollywood Bowl, of course, because we had somehow bypassed their damn thing completely. You know what I mean? Which is so simple to do. You just feed them a signal and tell them, yeah, that's what we're going through that. Yeah, that's right. And at the end of that show, me and the sound guy ran down and jumped in the pool at Hollywood Bowl. That's how crazy that was in those days. I'm surprised we didn't go to jail, but back in those days, it was okay.
A different world.
Yeah, it was a different world.
Do you miss that?
I did a lot of shows, so I'm kind of burned out on it all. And some
and
of
yet
them
you're
were.
still mixing to this day.
Oh yeah, well yeah, I'm a lucky guy. I have my, I have my great Crystal Bay Casino that I get to go mix shows at anytime I want. It's a wonderful thing. It's my retirement gig. I grew up in Hermosa, Redondo, Manhattan. That's where I went to South High School in Torrance, where we had surfers, which is what I was one of the surfers, and the ho daddies, and the ho mommies. And, nobody could interact, there was always a little war going on.
If you had to pick one band that you enjoyed working with more than all the others, could you do that?
I think I really enjoyed String Cheese Incident, and I really enjoyed Umphrey's McGee. Umphrey's McGee is a fabulous, fabulous bunch of musicians. I've never heard musicians so good as those guys. So good. I loved it when they took the DCX out. And I got so many recordings from that, and oh my God. They finally couldn't afford me any longer is what happened. We raised our prices on them, and they went, okay, that's it. But the sound guy stopped being the sound guy after the DCX went away. He then became the management of the band. And they have a new sound guy who can tolerate having the vocals fuzzy.
Was that Kevin Browning?
Kevin Browning was the guy, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
For 4 years, he did, holy moly, man. They did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shows. They were doing, what were they doing? About, how many shows a month were they doing? They were doing 15, 18 shows a month.
Yeah.
Kind of
Really
thing.
good. Really good.
A lot of shows. Love those guys. They cared about sound.
Yeah.
They were fabulous musicians.
Uh-huh. Was one of the things that attracted them to your console the fact that they were selling recordings and they could clearly hear the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were selling CDs after the show, so they'd record the whole thing on a CD recorder, and then they'd take that master and they had a duplicator, and they'd make a whole bunch right after the show and sell them. I have lots of those CDs. They're really wonderful. The DCX is a wonderful thing. You can tell the difference just like that when you're listening to the CDs.
How do you feel about the proliferation of plugins?
I think plugins suck. And not only that, but several of the people that have worked for companies, Ed Simeon, who TC Electronics, that's right, and he was one of the principal owners of TC. And when the plugins came along, he got so discouraged that he just bailed. He said the actual units are so much better than the plugins that I can't even talk to anyone anymore about these plugins. And it's that pretty much that way with all of them. You know, people have their favorite reverb and delay plugin, and that's it. That's all they ever use these days. All those plugins and all that stuff, I'm not sure anyone uses it anymore. I mean, they experimented with it, but when I talk to guys who are on the road using digital consoles, doing that, they said, I got my favorite reverb, my favorite delay. It's pretty much all I do. Once in a while, I got a special tube preamp for the mic, but I plug the mic into that and then plug that into the console. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much what they're doing these days. So plugins, I don't know what to tell you.
When people mix on your console these days, is there any single feature or part of the console that they all seem to identify with and instantly feel that this has solved problems for them that they've experienced?
You know, the thing is, it sounds fabulous, and that's the thing that it's the combination of all of it, and it just sounds fabulous. You're going to check it out tonight. You tell me what you think. Yeah, the room has a lot of, you know, reverberation because it's such a big room and a big dome ceiling that, you know, causes 160 cycles having to be turned down to compensate for that. But other than that, it's awfully good. Actually, the really great shows are in the red room, the little room. That's when we really turn out some fabulous shows.
If people wanted to hear the quality remotely of a Gamble console, how could they do this?
I'll make them a copy of the Sneaky Creatures CD if they want to check it out.
Do you have things posted online for people?
I have on archive.org, we have a whole selection of so many things that have been done on a DCX.
Yeah.
You enter Gamble, DCX as the key words, and all those songs will come up.
Yep.
We have lots of songs from the Crystal Bay Casino on there. If you add in a third, you know, thing, Gamble, DCX, and CBC, then all of those come up. So lots and lots and lots and lots of songs.
It's cool.
One of my favorite bands that I did there was Larry Carlton. God, what a fabulous, fabulous sounding band. And he has his son playing bass, and oh my God, they're good. That's one of the, I played that for you before.
Mm-hmm. If was anybody that comes to mind that you might mention that you'd love to put one of these in their hands, comment on that?
No. You know, I just take it as it comes along. We're always looking for new opportunities to try and get these out. We're trying to do it right now.
Earlier you were talking about that you utilize the finest components in your consoles, and you mentioned a particular capacitor or
The
resistor.
WEMA capacitors. They're
People,
made in Germany. They're, you know, non-polarized polycarbonate insulation, 63 volt, blah, 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 blah. Best you can buy in the whole wide world. That's what we use everywhere.
I've heard from various people over the years who have come here that you not only obtain components that are like that or that are 1% tolerances, but that you weed through every single component that goes into the console. and
We buy all these capacitors are 5% tolerance. All the resistors are 1% tolerance. I mean, this thing is so accurate, channel to channel to channel. You can't hear any difference between one and the other if you set them the same.
Mhm.
They're absolutely perfect.